And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Now known as the College of Physicians and Surgeons of British Columbia, the Medical Council of BC was founded in 1886 to regulate the practice of medicine under the authority of provincial law. The college's overriding interest is the protection and safety of patients. The role of the college is to ensure registrants meet expected standards of practice and conduct. Today on Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 1989.
The College of Physicians and Surgeons was damning in its criticism of Kuntz. It said there were obvious, serious inadequacies in Kuntz's physical examinations, diagnosis, record-keeping, indications for surgery, his post-operative care, and communications with colleagues. In short, the college wrote, "We are quite unconvinced that you are capable of performing as a thoughtful, discriminating, judicious surgeon," and concluded Kuntz did not have adequate skill or knowledge to practice orthopedics. However, thousands of Kuntz's former patients don't agree with that finding. They say Kuntz was an excellent doctor with better than average medical skills and knowledge.
I think the man is tremendously talented. I think he is brilliant.
Personally, I would place my life in his hands any day.
You mentioned rating him on a scale of 1 to 10. What did you give him?
Oh, I would give him a 10, definitely.
As far as I'm concerned, I would, not be ever afraid to go back to see Dr. Kuntz.
A key element of the college's investigation into David Kuntz involved his pioneering use of a small acrylic plug inserted in the patient's backbone to replace failed spinal discs. The traditional practice is to use a piece of bone taken from the hip. The use of the acrylic discs was not sanctioned by the college, but Kuntz performed hundreds of neck operations using the acrylic discs, which he fashioned himself. According to the college, the procedure was not satisfactorily proven to be safe and effective, but most patients who had the operation swear by it.
I was very pleased, extremely pleased. I just couldn't believe that something like this could improve in such a short time. I would say it was almost immediately, I haven't felt any more pain in my arm, and the numbness in my fingers went away.
Yeah, I would definitely say it was very successful, because after 2 years I was out of pain and I was feeling fine.
Oh, terrific. I had no migraine headaches right from day one, almost. That was the big advantage for me, because prior to the surgery I would have headaches virtually every day.
And how about today? Are they gone still?
Oh, yeah. No problems. That's great.
For many of Kuntz's ex-patients, the ruling disbarring him from medical practice, that he had insufficient skill and knowledge, was a bombshell.
Yeah, I was very shocked indeed. And especially around Christmas when we saw that in the newspaper that he was actually on welfare, that the government has to take care of him now. It's just, a man his caliber is just too shocking. It's just hard to believe.
The college finding about Kuntz's insufficient skill and knowledge also came as a surprise to many of his former colleagues here in the Northwest.
Do you think he had sufficient skill and knowledge to practice?
My feeling is that he did. In most areas, his knowledge was good, his skill was good, but I was at variance with some of his theories and indications, and this was a concern. In my practice, for instance, a person that needed to, say, have a lumbar disc operation, the problems of the lumbar disc and pressure on nerve and so on, if they had a specific indication for surgery, I would unhesitatingly send them to Dr. Kuntz, because my feeling was that his expertise was as good as anybody in the province.
Dr. Donald Strangway is the chief surgeon at the Terrace Hospital. In January, he and two other doctors, one from Prince Rupert, the other from Hazelton, sent 64 questionnaires to physicians across the Northwest. The doctors were asked to rate Kuntz's medical abilities on a rating from excellent to no opinion.
The reason it's being circulated is Dr. Kuntz actually came to me to discuss the question of what did the Northern Region doctors feel about him. That is, he had worked with us for many years, and as he said, he hadn't really asked for any help or support or advice at all from the medical community, but He would like to know at this stage what support does he have from the region, the doctors he's worked with.
Although doctors in Kitimat decided en bloc not to answer the questionnaire, 26 from other Northwest communities did respond. On the two key questions pertaining to the reasons for Kuntz's erasure, his skill and knowledge, the results flew in the face of the college's findings. 16 respondents rated the former doctor's technical skill as excellent, 7 said it was good, and 3 had no opinion. On Kuntz's knowledge of orthopedics, 6 thought it to be excellent, 13 said good, and 2 rated it fair. 5 respondents had no opinion.
So essentially 100% of them that had an opinion at all stated that the technical skill and knowledge was fair, good, or excellent. And yet the college removed me for a diametrically opposed reason, inadequate skill and knowledge.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thanks for staying with us. When most of us walk into a hospital or medical office, we sometimes take for granted that there is an overseeing body making sure physicians are qualified, competent, and fit to practice medicine. In British Columbia, that organization is the College of Physicians and Surgeons. Let us return to the archives as David Kuntz shares his concerns about a review.
In their review, the doctors here stated that 22 out of 24 of the physicians stated that their patients were in general happy with the results of their surgery. Now, surely if the patients matter in the system, the college should reassess its source of information.
So you're going to take that to the college and ask them to reassess, is that it?
The college has closed its doors. It seems to have excluded the patients from the system.
However, the doctor questionnaire was not all rosy in the picture it paints of David Kuntz's medical practice. 11 of the 26 replies listed his thoroughness of patient follow-up or post-operative care as poor, while 12 thought Kuntz operated on people, inserting the acrylic discs, when there may not have been a real need for surgery. But again, hundreds of former patients would disagree.
No complaints. Absolutely no complaints. In fact, prior to having the neck surgery done, I had one elbow and wrist done. And I had a bad time of it afterwards. I had a lot of pain, and I couldn't have asked for better care. I mean, he was there, the hand holding the whole 9 yards and saying, well, okay, we'll keep you in here for a day or so longer type thing. I had no complaints about that at all.
So his post-operative care of you was as good as you would want?
As good as I would ever expect to be any doctor to give me.
I think it's time for the public to question the credibility of the college if it does not consider it important to help people anymore, if the people are the throwaway item in the system. If it's become a self-serving thing for doctors and is no longer meeting its intended purpose of protecting the public and providing them with health care, then something's gone wrong. It seems to be now interfering with the provision of health care. It took away a service that the northern doctors were satisfied with, according to their survey, and it took away a service that the patients were satisfied with.
Kuntz has spent the time since he lost his license documenting a mountain of evidence, which he says will prove the college investigation was unfair, even criminal. He's met with officials from the Attorney General's Department, which reviewed his allegations, but concluded there was no substantial likelihood of a criminal conviction for any of the acts about which Kuntz has complained.
When I talked to the lawyers of the Attorney General Department, it was obvious they had not read the evidence, because I had showed them evidence of falsified medical documents and perjured statements, and yet they allowed this to pass. And it was obvious when I talked to them that they had not really read the evidence. Because of the nature of their questions, I could tell that they were not familiar with the material that was in their hands. They had not read it.
Kuntz has also met with Health Minister Peter Duick, and the Medical Services Commission is looking into the circumstances surrounding his dismissal. But Kuntz says the man heading the investigation is the same person who 10 years ago complained about Kuntz's medical practices.
It's very strange that 10 years later, the same Dr. Henderson is appointed by Mr. Duick to run the investigation for Mr. Duick as to whether the total thing was indicated, the thing which he himself set in motion. 10 years ago. Of course, he's got to cover his own tracks.
So you don't have any faith in Mr. Henderson's investigation?
In Dr. Henderson, no, definitely not.
And Koontz also has little hope that his appeals to the health minister will do any good.
Mr. Dewick originally had said he wanted to see justice done. This was when we spoke to him in Victoria in November. However, so far he does not seem to have done anything to bring about that justice that he'd like to see. He simply rubber-stamped the college, saying he had every faith in the college.
The health minister has stated college decisions can be appealed through the courts, but Koontz feels the only way he can clear the air about his erasure, one way or the other, is through a public inquiry, where, in an unbiased forum, he can present all the evidence he's documented. The courts, he says, are not a workable alternative.
We filed a notice of intention to appeal, and the date for filing an actual appeal was November 28th. We did not meet that deadline. We ran out of time, funds, and money, and we're being evicted from our home.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. A petition is a request to do something, most commonly addressed to a government official or public entity. Slaves building pyramids in ancient Egypt who petitioned for better working conditions is an example of one of the first documented petitions. Letters returned to the archives as 2 terrace residents review petitions collected asking for a provincial government inquiry.
There's growing support for David Koontz's call for a public inquiry. In the kitchen of a terrace home, 2 men sit at the table. In front of them are a stack of petition form letters. Since they started gathering signatures in January, some 2,600 people have signed the letters, all demanding the government establish a public inquiry into the Koontz controversy.
I feel that Dr. Koontz was railroaded in a kangaroo court, and I feel that everybody should have their day in court to explain why he feels that this is wrong. I believe that there was a witch hunt out after Dr. David Koontz, and I believe that there was 4 bureaucratic agencies involved in it.
So he didn't get a fair shake.
He never got nothing. Clifford Olson got a fair trial. Dr. Koontz got railroaded.
Many of those who signed the form letters also sent in personal letters testifying to Koontz's skill as a physician. Some are strongly worded, with phrases such as, "Thank God for Dr. Koontz."
Very strong feelings. Very strong feelings. You know, like, I have a letter here from Mrs. Helen Gray, and she writes on top that my husband was operated on February the 22nd, 77, lower back operation. Without this, my husband would not be working. Thanks, Dr. Koontz. You know, and I have another one here from a Carrie Steinke, and she writes, Doc Koontz did both my son's hips. My son is a senior skier. Thanks to Doc Koontz.
Many of those asking for the public inquiry are doing more than signing petitions and writing letters of testimonial.
You know, they ask us what they can do. We tell them about the letters that we're sending in, and then they ask us again, is there anything I can do to help, money-wise? And we say, okay, we need stamps, we need letters. Some people have, donated $10, $50, $100. There's been a couple of donations of $1,000, which has been very generous. And when you think about it, it makes you wonder, like I said, what kind of support he really had. People giving up that kind of money, that's really nice. It's very, and it's indicative of what kind of friendships he had, what kind of service he was giving to us, I think, too.
Despite the flood of petitions that have gone to Victoria, it doesn't seem to have done much to force an inquiry. Politicians are constantly being petitioned, and so the letters don't carry a lot of weight. The ineffectiveness of the campaign in getting a public inquiry does not surprise organizers, and so the question is, what next?
Exactly. What do we do next? I don't know. I think if you see how other people protest when they're trying to get the government to do action, that's what we'll be doing. Whether it be, picketing hospitals or picketing the government grounds down in Victoria. I'm not sure.
This here is the role of the WCB and the MSC in destroying the Northern Orthopedic Surgery Service provided by Dr. Kuntz in Kitimat.
What the Kuntz supporters did next was hold a public meeting in a terrace hall. About 40 people turned out, most of them former patients. And although they didn't need to be convinced of the former physician's skill, they heard the Kuntz situation likened to a diamond in the rough. On one side of the diamond is Kuntz himself. On another is the College of Physicians and Surgeons.
Now, on the far end of that diamond in the rough, you will find many folks like some of you here. You've been through it. Many of you have heard other doctors tell you that's as far as it can go. That's all that can be done. And then you've gone to Dr. Kuntz, and you walk, and you're back to work, and you throw a baseball with your children or grandchildren. And you've experienced that, and you're saying, never mind the politics. You don't care what's happened. Get this surgeon, get this skill back into our community. In the center 2 points of that diamond, we find the support of perhaps 22 or 24 physicians in this area who rate Dr. Kuntz, his surgical skill, his knowledge, his diagnostic ability as either superior or at least qualified for the job that we need done. On the bottom end of that scale, we have the people who will say that such a review would prove he wasn't. So all we want is that review. Give us that review, unbiased, objective, supervised by some persons outside the college, because the charges against the college and their actions are every bit as serious as the charges they have made against Dr. David Kuntz.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Public inquiries have become relatively common events in the Canadian politics, be it at the federal, provincial, or territorial levels. These public inquiries serve many different purposes, from examining allegations of government wrongdoing to studying diverse and complex issues dominating Canadian politics and policy making. In this final segment of Open Connection, we hear from a former mayor of Kitimat.
Council passed a motion to request that. A letter was sent off to Minister Dewick, and this is probably about 2 months ago now. And we just received a reply back about 3 weeks ago, and the letter reply back said that there were other avenues open to Dr. Kuntz and that he would have to follow that process. And I'm not quite sure of the wording of the letter at this point because it's been a while. But I think the minister also indicated that there was no evidence that things weren't done properly. Now, that's his opinion, and that's where the matter stands now.
While the calls for a public inquiry continue to grow, one body watching the situation very closely is the Kitimat Hospital Board. Since Kuntz was stripped of his license, the board has spent tens of thousands of dollars trying to attract another orthopedic surgeon to Kitimat, but without success. A continuing controversy has affected those efforts, and it's also reduced the number of people using the hospital services.
We've had, for that and other reasons, to condense the operation and are basically operating one ward now where we had two separate and distinct wards before. Probably the major part of that is the lack of orthopedics. And as far as recruitment goes, the unsettled atmosphere certainly hasn't done anything to enhance recruiting a regional orthopedic service. And I don't think there's any doubt that regionally we need it. And I would like to see this matter settled, and the sooner the better.
They've had an orthopedic specialist from another province, I think it was from Saskatchewan, who was looking in the area, and he hasn't come up yet. He hasn't shown up, and why not? I would suggest to you that he's talked to doctors in the area and found out that things didn't go quite right for Dr. David Kuntz. And here was a doctor who had one of the best reputations in the province, had one of the biggest practices in the provinces, and now he's lost his license. And why?
So you think that's scaring off potential replacements?
Oh, definitely.
While the Kitimat Hospital Board is not officially back calls for a public inquiry, its chairman thinks it might be a good idea.
Well, I think it'll take something like that because there seems to be so much conflicting evidence, so much conflicting opinion. that there's going to have to be some sort of independent inquiry, separate and distinct from anything that has been done to date, to really clear the air on this. And I would hope that it would happen with great haste.
While many think the solution to the Koontz controversy lies in a public inquiry to get all the facts clear and on the table, there would be no need for it if there wasn't a problem in the first place. And much of that problem was David Koontz himself. He was something of a renegade who had little time for protocol or regulations when he had his sights set on a specific goal.
Some years ago you had an opportunity to work with David Koontz. What sort of a doctor was he when you worked with him?
He's very much of an individualist. This is one of the things, of course, that brought him to the North Country. But you know, there were problems in terms of his teamwork. You know, you need to be unconventional to a certain degree in order to be an accomplishful sort of a person. But you know, if you conform exactly, then you know perhaps you don't push any new frontiers back either. But I think for a small community, my feeling is that Dave was, maybe he's a person that's ahead of his time. You know, I don't think you can say he's wrong or he's right. I think what you can say is he was doing a new procedure in small communities without a lot of backup help, all by himself, and it's difficult to do that.
I don't know, maybe it's his attitude per se. You know, he's a real kind of, how would you put it, a pioneer or one of these forgers, and just go ahead and get into these new fields. But as with us all, we have to learn to go by rules and regulations, you know, and there are set patterns to do things. He got into areas that are probably going to be very norm in another 5 or 10 years, you know.
Ahead of his time.
Way ahead of his time, I think. And the way he's being treated right now, I don't think is kosher. No, I don't agree with it at all.
While Koontz himself is obviously the big loser in this whole affair, there are others who have also lost something. The people of the Northwest no longer have an orthopedic service. Now, to get that specialized level of treatment, it means a trip out of the region.
I think that this is not only a Kitimat issue, it's a regional issue because the orthopedic surgeon was a regional service. And I think it's important to have those services available for people in the north so that we don't have to constantly be going to Vancouver at great expense and inconvenience. You know, we pay for it, we should have it.
Well, it's a bit of a scandal that the college fails to respond to the needs of the people and the wants of the people. It seems to want to concentrate all the expertise down south. It seems that it does not want consultants in the north. It seems that the people of the north are the pawns of the doctors in the south. They need them to feed their people factories. They don't want them to be helped up in the north. They need them for an income. And this seems to be what this boils down to in the end.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind to his heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Albert Pictou.